Morning, 5 minutes after 8 on Wednesday, the 23rd of September. Coming up later in this hour, women who wake up in a man's bed with no recollection of the night before should seek advice from a rape counsellor, so says the Director of Public Prosecutions. The latest migration figures are in. 1 million heading our way, says one newspaper, and we took 558,000 last year. We'll continue to look at this extraordinary developing Volkswagen or VW story. Oh, and Boris Johnson coming on later in this hour as well. I wonder if he has any views on that extraordinary book, Call Me Dave, all coming up. But as I've mentioned before, this hour starts with something we like to do as regularly as we can. Your opportunity to put your calls and your questions to the Commissioner of the Metropolitan Police, Sir Bernard Hogan-Howe, is in the studio opposite me. And I just have to say, Sir Stuart, and I think our first call reflects, Sir Bernard, I'm so sorry, Sir Bernard, this reflects the problems that in the past you and your colleagues have quite rightly talked about how crime has been dropping in most areas. But recently, and I think my first caller touches on this, we have a problem with knife crime, a considerable problem with knife crime. What are the Met doing about it?
Well, first of all, Nick, you're right. Over the last few months, probably about 16 weeks, we've seen a slight rise in knife crime. And any one of those is worrying.
Slight rise, Commissioner?
Well, it's a relatively slight rise because we've had about...
What do you have it in percentage terms?
Well, for 4 years, it's come down by a third, and it's raised by about a sixth. So it has raised, and I'm not contesting that. But what we've seen over the last 4 weeks is that we've started to plateau out, and it's actually starting to go down again. That said, I'm concerned about it. So back to your first question, what are we doing about it? Well, number one is we're doing more stop search. We said that we reduce it. We reduced it and still got crime to come down. But I think it's probably, it got to the bottom, so we're going to have to do some more. And secondly, we've reinvigorated the stuff we're doing around the gangs. So over the last, I think about 8 weeks, we've arrested 3,000 of them. These are big numbers. So we'll make an impact on it. But I am still worried about the number of young people, particularly who carry knives. So if you know anybody out there who carries a knife, tell us, because they might think they're defending themselves. But what will happen is they get taken off them. Knife in a fight, lethal thing.
I thought the Home Secretary Theresa May wasn't a fan of stop and search, so this is a contrary policy, is it?
I won't say it's contrary policy. I mean, to be fair, Nick, if you remember after the 2011 riots, I've been on your programme before and explained that I thought we were stop searching too many people. Now, about 1.4 million people a year, that's an awful lot of people. So we did get it down. And at the same time, we saw crime come down. So it was still possible to do both. Less stop search.
Why did you stop doing it?
Arrest more people. Because I think sometimes we were turning more people off than we were actually arresting.
What do you mean by turning them off?
Well, in the sense that we're stopping and searching our count about 1.4 million. We're only arresting about 7%. Right. So your criticism, perhaps journalist criticism, was, well, hang on, it's not very effective, is it?
Right.
93% of the time you stop the wrong people. So we managed to do two things, do less of it, but actually increase the number of arrests during the searches we made. So we're targeting better. We're teaching people with respect, which we should do, and according to the law. And yet we're still seeing crime come down. But over these last 6 months, which is your question, we've seen a slight rise, and therefore we're doing something about it.
Well, let's get this first caller in. Jessica is in Finsbury Park. I've covered some of the area, but you're through to the Commissioner. Go ahead, Jessica. Good morning.
Good morning. My question is, being that 85% of young people are well-behaved and striving to reach their dreams, how come the police, government and community leaders are not taking the troubled youth off the street and helping them to be better young people, instead of good youth are getting caught up in the disturbing situation, just being in the so-called wrong place, wrong time? It's not rocket science. The police know who they are. Eradicate skunk, weeds, and illegal high. These drugs lead to mental health problems. And I just want to know what are they going to do, because it's affecting me right about now.
Why is it affecting? Did you mean personally, Jessica?
Personally, yes, because my son was taken through the knife crime. Shaquan Sammy Plummer, he was stabbed to death. I'm
terribly sorry. When did this happen, Jessica?
That happened the 30th of January 2015.
Oh, God. I'm so sorry. How old was your son, Shaquan?
He was 17. He was meant to start university this September, which is really hard for me. On a day-to-day thing, it's like I cannot cope without my son.
You've done a tremendous job. Let me just bring your line down for a second. You've done a tremendous job. I'm sure your son will be very proud of what you said to the Commissioner, Sir Bernard.
Jessica, first of all, very sorry to hear about your son. It must have been very difficult to talk about what you just talked about, so I'm very sorry about that. You're quite right. As I said to Nick, I'm very worried about the number of people who do get stabbed, because every stabbing can lead to a murder, as with your poor son, and these are really dangerous weapons. What we're doing about it? Well, we are increasing stop search. Our gang work is doing far more, and that's not to say that every victim is in a gang, but many of the offenders are. And the government's helped a bit as well, because they've actually created a minimum sentence for those who do carry knives. A second offence, I remind people out there, for carrying a knife, you will go to prison for 6 months. So don't carry them. We've seen that work with carrying the firearms. We've seen far less firearms offences, and this is going to be helpful. And finally, I agree with Jessica as well, which is about the use of skunk. For me, skunk is not the cannabis of the 60s. It's a very potent drug. And what it does is that, particularly if kids take it under the age of 16, they're about 6 times more likely to have psychotic illness later. This is a very powerful drug. So I think all those people who say that it should be legalised, I don't agree. So we do treat it seriously, as we do, as Jessica was saying, these things that are now being called legal highs, but the government are just about to try and pass a law to do something about that. But it's a serious issue, and I'm very sorry about, obviously, Jessica and her family of losing a son.
Quick response from you, Jessica. Do you want to come back with anything?
Not really, but
right.
What I wanted to say, sometimes we blame the police officers. In some cases, it's not really them as such. We have to see, it's like you have the judges. To me, the time they give the children when they commit the crime, the time is not enough. Life should be in life, right, in prison for these kids, because at the end of the day, we don't have our children. I'm not talking for myself only, for all of us in the community with the problem. You understand?
I do understand, and I know I'm speaking on behalf of Sir Bernard. Our commiserations to you. You've done so well, and it is still so raw. I wish you commiserations and time. I hope you can start to put something together. Jessica, thank you. I do apologise. I have to move on to other callers. Craig is in Croydon, and this is a related issue. Craig, go ahead. Good morning.
Thank you, Nick. Does the Commissioner agree that Theresa May, with her arbitrary, forced-through, political-motivated reduction in the use of stop and search, was actually the direct result that we're seeing now is the 18% rise in knife crime across London and the high number of fatal stabbings of teenagers in London this year? And will he actually empower his officers and give them back the confidence to use that essential tool in the correct way that it actually was being used in the vast majority of instances anyway?
Craig, that's a very loaded question. Are you a policeman?
Yes, I am, sir.
Right, I thought you might be.
Does it matter, Commissioner?
Well, I always think it's I'm open. I'm sat here in a uniform.
Well,
I think
because
people are meant to be open. I was just guessing. I mean, first of all, as I said to Nick, I think we were... it would be easy to sit here and blame the Home Secretary, wouldn't it? Say it's her fault because she said do less stop search. But I was saying to you, Craig, if you work for us or you work for me, that I think at 1.4 million people out of an 8.6 population, there's a fair chance we'll sometimes stop searching the wrong people. So I think we have to get that better. I've said over the last 3 to 4 years, we've seen a huge reduction in knife crime and other types of crime, even though we've reduced stop search. And I've said about 4 months ago in the Met, we're going to have to turn this round because we've probably got to the bottom of where we should go in terms of stop search. So I can't blame the Home Secretary. It's partly what I think professionally we should be doing properly. We can only work within the law, and if we don't use the law properly, people will take it away from us. And that's what's happened in New York. They've had the same problem in New York with stop and frisk, and their stop searches went from nearly 1 million down to 23,000 because the power was taken away. I don't want to lose that power. We've got to be sensible with it, and I'm not going to blame someone else for decisions that we have to make.
What are the men and women who actually do the job on the beat every day saying briefly, Craig?
I know of officers who just turned around and said, well, I'm not going to do stop and search them because I don't feel that I'll have the support of management if there's a complaint that comes out of it. And obviously it is something that you are likely to generate complaints from doing. But
you're right to some extent, Craig, but let's be right. I mean, you know that we've got some good officers who can do stop search without complaints, and they can pick the right people. They've got some good arrest rates, and we've got some other officers who seem to make the wrong decision. And the way they treat people is not okay. So I'm going to defend the ones who do it right, and we're going to make sure that we work within the law. I think one big help in the future, in my view, will be that by the end of March, every officer on the front line, 22,000 staff, will have body-worn video. So if it's going well, we'll have evidence, and if it's going badly, we'll have evidence. During the time that we've actually reduced the number of stop search, we've also seen a huge drop in the number of complaints, because as you say, it can be contentious. Not everybody's going to accept it. Even good people will say, why are you doing this? And the bad guys say they don't want it to happen because they've got something to hide. So it's always going to be a little contentious. But one of the parts of my job is that I've got to balance what the public want, what others want, and make sure that we keep that vital power. I don't want to lose Stop Search, and I have to tell you, there were times when I was worried that we were going to lose it.
What do you mean? In what way would you lose it?
I think governments would start to question whether or not we were using it properly.
Theresa May, the current Home Secretary.
I don't think it's fair to say just to the Home Secretary. If you looked in Scotland, exactly the same debate. The Chief Constable up there coming under great pressure. Are you recording it? Are you using it properly? When they created a national force, had they rolled it out from Glasgow to Edinburgh to Aberdeen, they actually moved this very city-based power around. It's a very contentious power right around the world, whether it be Singapore, New York. So, at times you've got to make a judgment on these things, and my judgment is we've got to try and get it better. So we've got it to where I think we've trained better, we've got a better use of the power, we can show that we're using it properly.
Right.
This is a good time to start to put our foot on the accelerator, target the right people. As this lady just said, Jessica, she will support, and everybody will support, us stopping the right people. What they won't support, and what I was facing as I went around London in the first year I was here, black families in particular saying, why do you keep stopping my kid? I understand it once, I might understand it twice in a month, not 4 times in a week, when they've never been in trouble. And they never will be. This is a good family. So the good family said, I don't want you to stop Search, but I do want you to do it properly with respect. And that's what we're trying to do. But it's least to challenges both ways. You do too much, you get a challenge. You do too little, you could get a rise in crime. We're trying to get that balance right. It's not a perfect science, I acknowledge.
Craig, thank you. Rick, you're in Enfield. You're through to Sir Bernard. Go ahead, Rick.
Good morning, Commissioner.
Good morning, Rick.
Just wanted to ask you about PCSOs. I live in a part of North Enfield where in the recent weeks we've had a murder and serious knife crime. And my ward at the moment is only covered by a PCSO. I've got no actual, proper police officers, but I've got a PCSO. And I'm just wondering if the plans to remove PCSOs go ahead, how can you assure the people that, we're still going to see a presence on the street?
Well, first of all, Rick, there is no plan to remove PCSOs, but what there is, I'm seriously concerned about what the announcements that are to be made in December, November of this year. So that it's expected that we will lose a very significant amount of our budget. We've already lost 15%, which is about £600 million worth of budget. And we're the only force in the country to maintain our police officer numbers. But we've been told to plan for between a further 25 and 40% cuts. Now, at that stage, we've really got not many good options. Probably less police, probably less CSOs, probably less managers, which people will celebrate, of course. But my broad point is this is a lot of money. The Deputy Mayor said in January of this year, these are drastic cuts, and we are going to need to get ready for them. So what you've seen is speculation in the press.
How many police officers might we be talking about?
We don't know, Nick.
Well,
sorry.
That's Rick and Nick.
Rick.
You got it right.
Both of you, we just don't know yet. But, you can work it out. I mean, 100 million will buy you 2,000 police, and we're talking hundreds of millions further to come out of the budget. Now, we've got some plans where we think we can make reasonable savings, which aren't cops. And I think I've shown over the last 4 years that we've made reasonable savings and kept our police officer numbers high. We've reduced 3,500 police staff. We've sold a third of our estate. We've got rid of lots of measures already. There's more of that to come. But you've seen speculation over the last couple of weeks that on the 29th September, we're going to announce the removal of PCSOs. It isn't going to happen. I have to tell you some hard decisions to make by December, but we can hardly make decisions
on the 29th
of
September, you're going to announce what, the decision?
In December,
yes.
Then we will know what our money is for the future years.
Right.
When we know the money, then we'll have to make the decisions. Clearly, what's happening at the moment is we're working through what are our options.
All right. Thanks for the call, Rick. While we're on the subject of money, then how wise was it to spend £1 million on Operation Midland, which is a murder inquiry where, if I'm looking at it right, there's neither a victim nor any bodies?
Well, first of all, we've got a witness, which we have provided information, which we are working our way through verifying whether that's accurate.
When was the last time the Met spent that amount of money on a murder where there's neither victims nor bodies?
Let me just finish and then, of course, criticise me. That's part of the job.
Okay.
But all I'm saying is we had a witness who we have had an account from, and we're in the process of checking his account. Now, there's some serious allegations that have been reported in the press about murder. 3 murders, and also about sexual abuse of children. These are very serious things. We're getting criticised for the police generally, not taking this seriously over the last 30, 40 years. So we've had to be very detailed about that inquiry, and we're trying to verify that account. I think if we'd not taken allegation of 3 murders seriously, you'd have been critical, quite rightly. We are taking it seriously, and we hope to come to some conclusions about this as soon as possible.
So you can't remember the last time you spent this money on a murder inquiry where neither victims
or bodies? No, that's your version of what I said.
Well, sorry, please correct me where I'm wrong.
Well, we've talked on here about various inquiries where you put in the argument that we've had historical inquiries, many historical inquiries, where we've spent a lot of money to try and get to the bottom of things. There is no statute of limitations in this country, so we have to look seriously at every allegation, provided we find the initial account credible.
The witness known as Nick, is he no longer credible and true?
No, that isn't what we said. We said that
so he is still credible and true.
Well, no, that isn't what I said either. What was said, as you know, there was one of our superintendents in making a quick recourse in an interview used the words credible and true,
which you should never have used, Sir Bernard.
No, what we said, and we issued a statement yesterday, which people may have seen. I'm sure you.
1,200 word statement.
Let me just finish and then interrupt, of course. Which is that what we said is that obviously track credibly at the beginning, and obviously we now have to try and corroborate what he said. We said that the use of the word true, if it left the belief that in fact we were closed-minded about the outcome, that is wrong.
Oh, Sir Bernard, what does true mean? When a police officer says true?
We've said if it left the impression it's wrong, then of course that's the wrong impression. I think the DPP supported that as well yesterday. The only thing I'd invite people to say is that of course this officer said something very quickly in an interview. Don't look at what they said, look at what they did. You've just criticised me at the beginning for spending so much money being so thorough in looking into these allegations. We can't have it both ways. Clearly, that inquiry has been very thorough.
So actually, you don't have to say it's true to be thorough.
No, they've had an open mind about exactly what the allegations are, and they're working their way through it. The use of one word in one interview hardly indicates a closed mind.
So the position of Nick now, is his status a victim, an alleged victim, or is he a vulnerable witness?
We just treat them as a person as a witness. So we're working our way through what their allegations are, and we're trying to work out whether it's accurate. Well, no, we're saying that every victim is a witness. My point is that he's given an account, for example, of other people who were murdered. In that sense, he's clearly a witness. So we're working our way through his account to see how we can verify it.
In the 1,200-word statement, quite early on, you say, the statement says, our starting point with allegations of child sex abuse or serious sexual assault is to believe the victim. Why? Surely you do preliminary investigation first.
Well, all the advice in these cases, because all the criticism, in the historical cases, you don't believe these people when they come forward. They said a priest assaulted them, a teacher, a serious...
So you just take the person's word?
Hang on, let me just finish. So they say, a very senior, respectable person assaulted them, and if we're not careful, we were accused of disbelieving them from the beginning. So at least we listen to them and try to find out whether they are credible. We listen with an open mind.
But surely there should be some preliminary investigation.
Well, that's what we're in the process of doing. We should criticise me at the beginning for doing.
The superintendent involved, is it detective and superintendent involved? It's Kenny MacDonald who's involved in this, isn't it?
Yeah, but...
Is he still on the case?
Let's just not concentrate on the video. I'm not going to come on here to throw my stuff to the wolves like you, okay? I came on here...
I'm not throwing my stuff to the wolves.
No, but I'm not going to. I'm just explaining. I think they've carried out a very thorough and professional inquiry, which they're in the middle of, and you're now saying, why are we still carrying it on? But for that one word, then I think, in fact, it's been a very good inquiry.
It's quite a big word.
We aren't at the end of it yet, and we're going to be determined to get to the bottom of it.
And it's being reported that you'd like to... the Met would like to close down Operation Midland. How true is that?
That's not accurate. We will do whatever we need to do to get to the bottom of this. It's taken a while to get this far, but the trouble with these inquiries is often the victims and the witnesses don't have total recall of the information, the detail of the offence, and clearly we have struggled at times to corroborate with such a passage of time some of the things that have been said. Journalists have found the same problem.
This is a shambles, isn't it?
No, it's not a shambles at all.
But
for the sake of one word,
the former
it's very
director
unfair.
of public prosecutions
But for the sake of one word, Nick, that's what it boils down to.
The traditions of justice have
Can
been
you tell me where
aside.
No, that's not true.
I'm sorry, that is what Lord MacDonald says.
Yeah, well, Lord MacDonald seems to have got quite a few comments. He's a Liberal MP, and he comments on almost every inquiry. My point is this: look at the quality of the investigation, not on the one word.
But lastly on this, my listeners feel very uncomfortable when they see people such as Lord Bramall, who's in his 90s, who has a distinguished war record. Dear God, he served in the Normandy landings. He led, I think, the invasion of the Falklands. He has 14 people, a 91-year-old man. He has 14 of your men go and search his home on the word of someone who is perhaps still credible, perhaps not true.
Yeah, well, I'm not going to talk about individual cases, if you don't mind. I hope you'll appreciate that. But we're doing our best to verify the claims of the various complainants and the various witnesses. These are not easy cases. People say, well, why haven't you sorted it out by now? Well, sometimes other witnesses are abroad. They don't always want to talk to us about it. And sometimes they have limited recall, and it's hard at such a distance to rely on things like forensic evidence. So long as it is, we will get to the bottom of it. But of course, you have to remember, as I'm sure your listeners do, this is such a serious issue that the government ordered a public inquiry under Lord Justice Goddard, which will go on for many years. But so it's not just the police taking it seriously, the government has too.
But isn't that the reality that, unfortunately, and not on your watch, Jimmy Savile was allowed to slip through? So now anybody, Jimmy Tarbuck, Jim Davidson, Cliff Richard, William Roach, Lord Bramall, Leon Britton, Sir Bernard, went to his grave with a rape charge hanging over his head.
Well, we're not responsible.
Unsubstantiated.
No, we are not responsible for obviously the people who come forward and make the allegations. We have to take it seriously.
But it is your job to do some preliminary investigation before we go public and we hear everything.
But Nick, there's no such thing as a preliminary investigation. Yeah, you do one or you don't. You can't turn around after 7 days, we've done a preliminary, we don't think it's okay. You've got to be thorough. Now, of course, if somebody approaches us and at the beginning is incredible, it doesn't make any sense in its own terms, of course we wouldn't pursue it. I mean, if you said, I was a child last year and I was sexually assaulted.
Well, I'll be believed. If someone said Nick Ferrari touched me inappropriately in a radio studio, the next thing I know, I'm going to get nicked.
My point is, Nick, last year you weren't a child. It's incredible. You can't believe it. My point is, if we look at the initial account and it appears to not stand up, of course we wouldn't pursue it any further. If it seems that the person, for some reason, has repeatedly done this, of course we're going to be very suspicious. But you have to accept that where credible people come forward, who don't have a criminal background, who work in a professional way like you and I do, and make allegations, we have to take them seriously. Where there is something.
These credible people, their emotional stability is assessed as well.
We do all that, but equally we have to...
So Nick's emotional stability, the man known as Nick, his emotional stability was carefully tested.
Too far into this, except to say...
no one knows who Nick is.
Well, let me just say two things.
Go ahead.
The first thing is that in terms of people who come forward after sexual abuse, sometimes they're not emotionally stable. In fact, the thing that they're complaining about has damaged them for all their life. So we can't judge people by their emotional stability. And if you look, you're referring to that 1,500-word document. Yeah. You, as with many written journalists, have only concentrated on the second part because the first part warns all journalists not to speculate or encourage speculation about the identity of Nick.
Hang on. Speculation surely is provided by one of your serving officers who tells us all that what he says is true.
No.
I think the police plays its fair part in the speculation.
The speculation that I refer to is about the identity of the person given the name of Nick.
Right.
That would be entirely improper for journalists, not you, but journalists who are starting to speculate and actually trying to identify the individual, which is legally protected, and we are warning them in that statement to take great care.
But then, if you remember the case of the former Prime Minister Edward Heath, that's when the police put his name out there.
Well, to be fair, that wasn't the Met.
No,
I've got enough on accounting for the Met. I'm not going to account for Wiltshire Police. But I think you'll find that I've been consistent.
That was rather unwise, wasn't it?
But Nick, I think you'll find we've been consistent. We do not put the names.
But let's talk a little bit about Mr. Heath. That was unwise, wasn't it?
We do not put the names of suspects into the public domain, even though journalists urge us to do the very thing that you just said we shouldn't do. So for the last 4 years, during the Wheating stuff and the hacking, journalists have said, why don't you name this person? Why don't you name that person? Because for the very reason you're challenging me about them being named in this case. But we didn't.
We must move on, was there a Westminster paedophile ring and operation?
I don't think we know yet. The reason that Midland is taking so long is because these are serious allegations. We're doing our best to investigate.
You're a copper. You're a copper's copper. What's your gut, Commissioner?
My gut is no good in these cases.
I don't believe that.
No, that's not true. If you're talking about something that happened yesterday, I'll give you my gut reaction. And you know me well enough to know I'll be frank. Something such a long time ago, there is so much that's difficult to unpick. And I've talked to some of the investigators in these cases, and every time each one of us thinks, hang on, that doesn't quite stack up, or that looks very, very likely to have happened, you often find there's some twists and turns, which we can't reveal, but those twists and turns are vitally important to any investigation.
We've got a 91-year-old war hero with this hanging over his name.
Well,
that's not fair.
I can't talk about individual cases.
Anna's in Feltham. You're through to the Commissioner. Go ahead, Anna.
Good morning, Nick. Good morning, Commissioner.
Good morning, Anna.
Good morning. Good morning. I want to ask you, do you take seriously break-in of houses, burglars? Do you take them serious?
What makes you think he doesn't, just out of interest, Anna?
Well,
or the police doesn't?
When I read the papers,
yes,
when it tells me that it's gone down to 6%, it's gone down, I just cannot get my head around all this. I don't believe it.
And then again, you've not been helped by other forces where perhaps they're only going to investigate if it's according to the door number, or Sarah Thornton saying that perhaps you could email in the details of your burglary. You've already spoken about that in the past, of course.
Yep. Well, first of all, we do take it seriously, Anna. I think what you find other people worry about burglary, and I'd regard it as a serious thing. As Nick said, I don't agree with what has been said by others. If you have a burglary, we are going to come. If somebody invades your home, it's a serious matter. Somebody could get hurt. So it is serious, and we do attend. Number two is that on the whole, burglary's coming down. I mean, if you look over the last 40 years, it's just gone down and down. It's true that our detection rate is relatively low. No, very low, 6%. It's the same around the country, it's low. It's not a very highly detected thing. But the reason it's gone down over the 4 years that this report is referring to is because the 6% is a true 6%. It's ones where we've charged somebody. They went to court for that offence. But some other offences where they had them taken into consideration, the offender agreed they did it. We couldn't prove it probably, but they agreed and they had to get it written off. We started not to count that because we don't think that's the best way of counting. Other forces still do that. Well, that's up to them. But from prison visits to taking into considerations, we've said forget those. What really matters to, I think, to the victim is, do you get a charge? Did they go to prison for it? So we do take it seriously, but I understand why the detection rates are worrying.
One final question. I know we're over time, but it's something that I know you're very personally motivated by, Commissioner. Jamal in Chelsea, your question to Sir Bernard. Go ahead.
Hi, Sir Bernard. My question is, I'm applying for the Met Police Force. My question to you is, why is it taking the Met Police to consider recruit more variety of ethnic minorities? And don't you think it will take some time for new recruits to integrate, since there may be many stereotypes?
I'm glad you can take this call, because I know from personal experience how hard Sir Bernard and actually commissioners before you have worked on this, in fairness. Commissioner.
One thing that might help me, Nick, unless Jamal can help me, I've just missed the very first part of what you said. I know what he's about.
A copper.
Yeah, but I missed the first
Why
bit.
have you been so slow to adopt ethnic minorities? Why are you so slow to promote them through? Are you doing enough?
All right, thank you.
And previous commissioners have spoken about this, and I know it's something that motivates you.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, Jamal, I think we've done a huge amount, and it is working. If you looked at this year alone, about 1 in 5 of our recruits now is from minorities. During the time I've been here, which is 4 years, we used to have 3,000 of our 30,000 officers who are from minorities, and it's gone up to nearly 4,000. So it's gone up a third, if you like, in the last 4 years. And we've done it in a couple of ways. One, taken it seriously, got out there and got into minority communities and said, we want you. And that's what I'm saying today. 2 is we introduced the London residency test about a year ago. We got a lot of criticism from people who don't live in London but were born here, and various other things, but it's really been helpful. And the third thing, we've had a go with a pilot on second languages. So if you've got a second language, we'll prioritise your application, because we think that's what London is now. Sadly, I'm a person, I was saying to Nick at the beginning, I don't speak a second language. I wish I did. But our officers more and more do need that. So we've done an awful lot to encourage that. And secondly, in terms of progression, the progression is going pretty well. If you looked at my management board now, there are 7 of us, half are women. We've got one minority member there, a woman who's mixed race. She's not there because she's a woman, she's not there because she's mixed race, but she's very, very good. It happens to be that we're getting more representation. Of our 32 borough commanders, we've got 5 black men. We've got no black women who are leading the boroughs. So I think you can see that we're making progress. And if you've got people out there, just encourage them to ask their kids to become police officers and regard it as a professional future, because Yeah, I mean, we talked a lot today quite properly about some things that will be criticised from time to time.
Fairly criticised, some would argue.
Yeah, I don't. I will never challenge that. I think in a big organisation, we'll get a lot of things right, and if we don't get it right, I always expect to be held to account for it.
Well,
but yesterday, and Nick knows this because he's been to our awards. But yesterday, I gave out commissioners' comments to quite a few officers, and there were one half of the awards were to Royal Humane Society people. They get an award for that, saving someone's life. And the other half were officers being very brave. So one of them, I remember, on the Humane Society in particular, who dived into a river following an offender who he was chasing. The bloke went under the water, he dived into water, grabbed hold of his hair, pulled him out, and together with a colleague, going back to the shore and got him and saved his life. Another two officers who went into a house, 3-month-old child on the bed, a man with knife, stopped him getting into the room, attacked them. One of them gets stabbed in the shoulder twice. Then his colleague saved his life, really. Now, that happens sort of every night. I talked to an officer last week, broken nose, woman who gets hit in the head with a crash helmet because of these moped robberies we're having.
Yeah.
There's some fantastic officers out there.
It's my privilege to do those.
We have the unfortunate thing. I'm a human being. I make mistakes, and sometimes we do. But on the whole, they're not bad, actually, are they?
They're not. Final point, the Sun newspaper today, I'm sure you've had sight of it, or one of your colleagues has put it in front of you, they called a police farce in their editorial, or the Sun says column. This is as a result of Lord Sewell not facing any action for allegedly snorting cocaine with two prostitutes. It ends with, it's a laughingstock, the police now under Bernard Hogan-Howe.
News International constantly challenge me, I realise that, and the Sun in particular. But what I will say, when we try not to talk about individual cases, it's very hard in this case, I realise. But we made a very clear statement in this case, which is that unless the forensic evidence is there, and unless we have statements from witnesses, then we will struggle to prove a charge.
And the ladies involved.
Let me just be clear.
Sorry.
As it happens, the newspaper involved in this, ask them how much they helped in this inquiry.
Fill in the blanks, Sir Bernard.
No, I'll let them fill in the blanks, because there are lots of them.
We'll leave it there. Always good to see you, Commissioner Sir Bernard Hogan-Howe.